Gildan Audio presents an unabridged recording of Bending Adversity, Japan and the Art of Survival by David Pilling, narrated by Timothy Andres Pabon. Forward. All books come from somewhere. This one was swept into existence by a giant wave. For me, the catalyst for writing about Japan was the earthquake and tsunami of March 2011. I had lived in Japan as a foreign correspondent from 2001 to 2008, and had often thought about writing a book back then. But the daily pressures of news reporting and my own lack of urgency ensured that the idea of a book remained just that, an idea. I left Japan at the end of 2008 and went on to other things. When the earthquake struck on March 11, 2011, I flew to Japan to cover the disaster both in the immediate aftermath and over the ensuing months. The scale and horror of the catastrophe, and the way the Japanese sought to confront it, provided impetus for an idea that had lain dormant in my mind for several years. My aim was to create a portrait of a stubbornly resistant nation with a history of overcoming successive waves of adversity, from would-be Mongolian invasions to repeated natural disasters. The portrait would be rooted in my own 7 years' experience of reporting and living in the country during a time of economic slowdown and loss of national confidence, but one told as far as possible through the voices of Japanese people themselves. It would largely be a portrait of contemporary Japan, a country that, in spite of its obvious difficulties, is changing and adapting in ways that are often invisible to the outside world. But it would also be a depiction rooted in its historical context, since events in the present are rarely fully comprehensible without reference to the past. That is certainly true of Japan, where history and tradition are ubiquitous, peeping from behind the endless concrete of what can seem one of the most relentlessly modern urban landscapes on Earth. This, then, is not a book about the tsunami. The scope is much broader. But the triple disaster of earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown provided a starting point for an inquiry into how Japanese institutions and, just as important, Japanese people have dealt with adversity. As the crisis unfolded, there were many failings as well as much to admire. But the tragedy reminded us of what we should not have forgotten: the extraordinary resilience of a people who live in...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?